The sound of suitcase wheels dragging across stone cut through the November air like a blade slicing through silk, smooth, unavoidable, and final. I stood behind the kitchen glass, my coffee cooling in my hand, watching my husband of 10 years step out of the Uber with that shine people only have after expensive vacations or after well-crafted lies. 14 days, exactly 2 weeks, he said he'd be gone for an important work retreat at a resort in the Bahamas. A retreat so important that it didn't allow spouses, he explained with an evasive smile. Important enough that his phone was unreachable during the golden hours. Important enough that when I called his company line to leave a message, the secretary paused, a tiny hesitation before saying she'd pass it on. A pause long enough for everything in my head to snap awake. I kept quiet. Said nothing when he left, nothing during the 2 weeks he was gone, and nothing now as he walked up the steps with that lightness guilt often tries to disguise as joy. The door opened. "Honey, oh my God, I'm home," he blurted out, as if he'd just landed safely from some grand mission. He looked strangely radiant. Sun-kissed skin, a warm bronze that didn't come from conference rooms, but from beach sunlight. Bright eyes, well-rested, more alert than he'd been in months. He wore a new linen shirt, thin white, the kind people buy when they're trying to turn themselves into some alternate version of who they are. He put his bag down and walked over to hug me. I hugged him back, felt his arms, smelled a strange cologne, one that made my stomach drop. "How was it?" I asked, keeping my voice even, almost indifferent. "Exhausting." He sighed in a performative way, stepping back just enough to set up the perfect script. Back-to-back sessions, workshops, networking every night. Almost couldn't breathe, but productive. Very productive. I nodded slowly, took a sip of cold coffee, watching him watch me. He was good at this. I'll give him that. A decade together had taught him how to read my moods, adjust his words to match the temperature. But he didn't know what I knew. He couldn't know that in the last 14 days, I had become someone else. Someone who checks call logs. Someone who calls in old favors. Someone who sits in a car in a parking lot waiting for the truth to reveal itself. "Great, Curtis. Really great," I said, and set my cup down. "You look tired. Go shower, unpack. I'll get dinner ready." Something flickered on his face. Subtle, like relief. "You're amazing," he said, just exhausted from the flight. He hauled his suitcase upstairs. I heard the familiar sounds filling the house. The bedroom door opening, the thud of the suitcase on the bed, the bathroom door closing, the shower turning on. Everything normal. Too normal, as if the past 2 weeks had been exactly what he said they were. I took out my phone and looked at the photo again. The one Esme sent me. Esme, his coworker. The woman, always smiling. The one who naturally gravitated to taking care of him during company events. The one who had appeared in late-night messages these past 6 months that I had intentionally waved off as harmless jokes. In the picture, they were at a beachside restaurant. Curtis smiling, Esme smiling, Curtis's hand resting on her arm, the sunset catching his wedding ring like a silent taunt. They looked like a couple. They looked like people who had forgotten anyone else existed in the world. Esme sent that picture to me, because we used to be friends. A small glitch, a rushed wrong chat, and the truth suddenly bloomed on my screen. A follow-up message. "Oops, wrong chat, sorry." 3 minutes were enough for me to screenshot. 3 minutes were enough for the scene to burn itself into my retina. I deleted the photo and put my phone down. Upstairs, the water stopped. I heard him humming as he dried his hair, the sound of a towel wrapping around him, the sound of normalcy, of something he thought he still had the right to fake. Then he came downstairs in a sweatshirt, hair still damp, soft in a way that reminded me of the man I married. For a moment, an old instinct stirred, wanting to comfort, wanting to believe. But I remembered. I remembered the small signs he tried to hide, silenced notifications, a sentence slipped out of pattern, an action adjusted to fit a story. I stayed calm. I had spent 2 weeks mastering this, reading pauses, guessing what was being hidden inside the silence. "Hungry?" he asked, trying to keep the conversation flowing like nothing had happened. I slid my phone into my pocket, smiled lightly, a smile I had practiced to hide the blade under the calm surface. "I made your favorites," I said. He sat down slowly, as if everything was fine. He talked. About meetings, about a guest speaker who said something that changed his perspective, about a night with good wine. I nodded, listened, sipped my cold coffee, trying to keep my voice from breaking the fragile artificial air between us. When he said he was too busy to text, I stayed quiet. When he said he met interesting people, I just looked at him. I had clues. The credit card charges, the dinner receipts at times he claimed to be in sessions, the messages he'd deleted from his phone but forgot to clear from the cloud, fragments of another story. I didn't ask. I didn't accuse him right then. I let him eat, let him talk, let his performance expose its own cracks. Because sometimes silence is the fairest weapon. It makes people reveal themselves, trip over their own words. And when he left the table, taking his suitcase back upstairs to reorganize his clothes, I stood up, walked into the kitchen, and poured myself another coffee. The second cup was much more bitter. I swallowed it, letting the bitterness take the place of the questions I wasn't ready to voice yet. I looked out the window, where the sky was gray, and the rain poured down like it was washing away the tracks of his suitcase on the driveway. But some marks, deeper ones, no rain could ever erase. What will you do with this truth? Will you let him pay with your silence, or will you turn these pieces of paper into the kind of light a betrayer can't hide from? Remembering the day I got that missent photo, in just 2 hours, I had built a timeline that made my stomach twist. The business trips started 18 months ago. The sudden overnight conferences, the last-minute client meetings in cities Curtis had never once mentioned before. All paid for by the company, all with explanations so reasonable they were impossible to argue with. But when I cross-checked every one of his card transactions against his schedule, the picture sharpened into something brutally clear. Fancy dinners for two in places he claimed he had been in meetings all day. Room service bills triple the portion of a single person. Purchases from women's clothing boutiques, jewelry stores, lingerie shops, all spaced out deliberately. Any single detail wasn't enough to raise suspicion, but together they formed a complete pattern of deception, undeniable and fully formed. Then I found the burner phone. It was hidden in his office cabinet, tucked inside an old briefcase he hadn't used in years, a cheap flip phone with exactly one saved contact, BD. I photographed everything. The phone itself, the call log clogged with months of near-daily contact. Then I put everything back exactly where I found it and went to make myself a cup of tea. My hands weren't shaking anymore. Sitting at the kitchen table, sipping Earl Grey from the wedding day teacup my mother gave me, I started forming a plan. At first, it was just a vague thought. But the more hours passed, the deeper I dug through Curtis's layers of lies. That faint breath turned into a roar. He thought he was clever. He thought he'd married a quiet, compliant wife who would fall apart the moment a storm hit. He had no idea the woman he betrayed once assisted the FBI in tracking down a cross-continental embezzlement ring. No idea that I had spent 6 months restoring a financial system that had been deliberately destroyed. No idea I had a network of colleagues in banking, investigation, and law enforcement, people who owed me big favors. Most importantly, he didn't know that everything he owned, the house, the investments, the assets he'd spent years building, was about to become a weapon against him. By Thursday night, I had enough evidence to drown Curtis in any divorce court. But as I stared at the pile of documents stacked high across the table, I knew it still wasn't enough. Not even close. A divorce would give me half of everything, and give him the other half, letting him stroll away free, ready to start a new life with his mistress. He might suffer financially, but he'd still get to rebuild. That wasn't justice. That was just division. No, Curtis needed something more personal, more complete. He needed to know what it felt like to have his entire life flipped inside out in a single breath. To taste that stunned paralysis when everything you believed in turns out to be a lie. And I was going to give him exactly that. Friday morning, I drove downtown to see an old friend. Ginny Williams ran a private investigation office specializing in discreet family matters, helping wealthy women gather infidelity evidence solid enough to survive any courtroom. "Natalie," she hugged me as I walked into the spotless lobby. "It's been forever, but I'm guessing this isn't a social visit." Ginny and I had worked several cases together years ago. She handled fieldwork, I handled financials. We were a strong team, and above all, I trusted her. "I need your help," I said, plain and direct. "And everything has to stay completely off the books." An hour later, I hired Ginny to surveil Curtis immediately during this very trip. I also hired her partner, Mateo, a former federal agent, to run background checks on anyone Curtis had been in contact with in the past year. She looked at me, reading the tension in my eyes. "Promise me you're not going to do something stupid. I've seen brilliant women do reckless things when they're hurt." "I'm not angry," I said, and realized it was true. The blaze of fury from the first night had frozen into something colder, sharper, more focused. "I'm operating systematically." That afternoon, I made 3 more stops. First, my attorney's office, where I quietly updated my will and established a trust to protect my personal assets in case of divorce. Second, the bank, where I opened a new account under my maiden name and moved in enough money to make me fully financially independent. When Curtis called that evening to check if I was okay, I was already fully prepared. "How's the Bahamas?" I asked, leaning back on the bed with a cup of tea and a book I wasn't actually reading. "Boring as hell," he said, and I could hear the rehearsed exhaustion in his voice. "Difficult clients, depositions running longer than planned. I might have to stay an extra few days." "It's fine, honey," I said softly. "Just do your work. I just miss you." "I miss you too, Natalie. You don't even know—" The certainty in his voice was almost convincing. If I didn't know the truth, I might have believed him. "Curtis," I said before he hung up. "Yeah?" "I love you. No matter what happens, I want you to know everything I do is for the kids." A pause. "That's sweet, Natalie. I love you too." After he hung up, I sat on the bed for a long time, looking at the picture frames beside the lamp. The wedding photo, me at 25, glowing in a lace dress, convinced Curtis and I would grow old together. Our 5th anniversary in Italy, both sunburned, grinning wide in front of the Colosseum. In each picture, my smile was real. I looked like a woman who loved her husband with her whole heart. Looking at them now, I felt grateful, not sad, not angry, but something colder, clearer. Because the woman in those photos, the one who believed in fairy tales and forever, she was gone. In her place was someone else, stronger, smarter, and infinitely more dangerous. Curtis had created his own worst enemy, and he didn't even know it. Saturday morning, the first truly brutal news arrived. Mateo called at 7 a.m. with a preliminary report. "Her name is Esme Whitaker," he said bluntly. 28, paralegal at Hartley & Associates, the same firm your husband is consulting with. I tightened my grip on the phone. "How long?" "Bust on what I found. About 14 months. She joined 18 months ago, and the unusual charges on Curtis's card started about 4 weeks after." 14 months. Over a year of lies. Curtis coming home every night after spending the entire day with her. Me still cooking his favorite meals, doing his laundry, planning our future, while he quietly built a different future with someone else. "There's more," Mateo said. "She's pregnant." The phone slipped from my hand and clattered against the table. For a few seconds, the world went completely silent. Then I picked it back up, my voice perfectly steady. "How far along?" Around 3 months. She's had multiple checkups. Curtis paid with a separate credit card. 3 months. Which meant Curtis had known at least a month, probably more. And he still got into bed next to me, still planned work trips, still played the role of devoted husband while his mistress carried his child. Send me everything, I said. Every detail, every photo, every receipt. Natalie, one more thing. She's also married, but her husband seems unaware. After that, I sat in the flawless kitchen of our flawless home and laughed. A real laugh, until tears streamed down my face. Everything was worse than I imagined. So bad it became absurd. Curtis wasn't just cheating. He was building an entirely new family while pretending nothing was wrong with me. 2 parallel lives. And he thought he was smart enough to keep them balanced forever. But he didn't know his mistress also had 2 households. I spent the rest of Saturday piecing together the full scope of Curtis's betrayal. The financial evidence alone was enough to ruin him. Secret credit cards, hidden cash withdrawals, expensive gifts, prenatal bills. But when combined with Ginny's surveillance photos, Mateo's timeline, and the call logs I'd gathered myself, the picture was frighteningly clear. Curtis Harlow, the husband everyone admired, was actually a liar, a cheat, a fraud. He was siphoning money from our joint account to support a pregnant mistress, while lying to me about work trips that were actually romantic getaways. But the worst part wasn't the cheating, it was the cowardice. He didn't have the courage to end our marriage before starting another life. He chose to leave me hanging, waiting, trusting, while he tried to enjoy both worlds. By Sunday night, I had a plan. Complete, ruthless, unbreakable. Most importantly, it would make Curtis feel exactly what he had made me feel, the total collapse of everything he thought was certain. He wanted to live 2 lives? Fine. But he was about to learn that every action has a cost, and some betrayals require a price no one can pay in a lifetime. I called Ginny. I need you to find out every future plan of Esme Whitaker, I said. Housing, employment, major transactions. I think Curtis is planning to leave me. I want to know exactly the life he thinks he'll have. Natalie, Ginny said slowly. What are you planning to do with this information? I'm going to make sure the life he dreams of with her, I said, will never, never happen. That afternoon, I made a few more calls that would make Curtis drop dead if he ever found out. Because while he was enjoying his vacation with his mistress, I had been building a network of my own. My first call was to Amanda Foster, a reporter who specialized in legal affairs and professional misconduct at the Portland Tribune. Amanda and I had worked together on a judicial corruption case 2 years ago, and she still owed me a significant favor. I have a story for you, I said. A well-known consultant in the area has been using client money to support his pregnant mistress while lying to his wife about business trips. Interested? Very, Amanda replied instantly. How solid is your evidence? Rock solid. Financial records, photos, witness statements, everything. When do you want to go public? Soon, I said. I'll let you know. The second call was the most important. I called the main line at Hartley & Associates and asked for the managing partner. This is Natalie Harlow, I said, when Jonathan Hartley picked up. My husband, Curtis, is consulting for your firm. I'd like to meet to discuss some concerns regarding a potential conflict of interest. A long silence followed. Mrs. Harlow, I'm not sure what sort of conflict you're referring to. It's better we discuss it in person, I said. Are you free tomorrow at 3 p.m.? Another pause, longer this time. 3 o'clock, I'll see you then. Great. That evening, Curtis called as usual. How was your day, sweetheart? He asked, traffic sounds echoing through the speaker. He was probably driving from the office to wherever his mistress was waiting. Quiet, I said. I've been thinking a lot about us, about our future. Our future? I know we talked about this before, but I think it's time we considered having another child. I said it lightly. The silence on the other end was deafening. Then I heard the faint rustle of clothing And it hit me. Someone else might be in the car, and I knew exactly who. Natalie, he finally said, we already agreed. One daughter is enough. I know, I said. But people change. Priorities change. Lately, I just feel our daughter deserves a sibling. Let's talk when I get home, he replied tensely. This isn't something to discuss over the phone. Of course, I said. When will you be back? Tomorrow, around noon. Then I'll cook your favorite meal, and we'll talk. After hanging up, I sat in the growing darkness of the living room and allowed myself one moment of real sorrow. Not for the marriage, that had died more than a year ago. I just hadn't seen it clearly until now. I mourned the woman I used to be. The woman who wanted a child with him, who trusted him with her whole heart, her future, her life. That woman deserved to be grieved. But she also deserved justice. And tomorrow, that process would end over dinner. At 3 o'clock Tuesday afternoon, I walked into the Hartley & Associates office, wearing my best deep navy suit and carrying a leather briefcase filled with copies of every piece of evidence I'd gathered. The lobby was all glass and polished steel, designed to show clients their success. Jonathan Hartley came out to greet me himself, which told me exactly how seriously he was taking this meeting. He was a man in his 60s, silver hair, an expensive suit that spoke of a lifetime spent in corporate law. Mrs. Harlow, he said, extending his hand, thank you for coming. Shall we talk in my office? His office was exactly what I expected. Floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the city, shelves stacked with awards and textbooks, a large desk worth as much as a small car. He motioned for me to sit in the leather chair across from him, then took his seat. So, he folded his hands. How can I help you? I opened my briefcase, pulled out a single photo, and placed it on his desk. Curtis and Esme walking out of a hotel in Seattle, his arm around her waist, both of them smiling brightly. The timestamp proved it was one of his so-called business trips. Jonathan Hartley's face went pale. Mr. Hartley, I said, I'm here because I believe your firm has inadvertently enabled an unethical relationship between my husband and your employee. I hope we can resolve this quietly, without the press. He stared at the photo for a long time, then looked up. Mrs. Harlow, I want you to understand our firm has very clear policies regarding relationships between consultants and employees. I'm sure you do, I cut in. The question is, in this case, were those policies enforced? Because based on my investigation, my husband falsified his billable hours, took reimbursements from your firm, and used that money to fund his relationship with Ms. Whitaker. I placed 3 more documents in front of him, copies of the invoices Curtis submitted, credit card receipts for gifts and hotel rooms matching the dates he claimed he was working, and a timeline showing the direct correlation between his reimbursements and his personal spending. This is very serious, Hartley said, scanning each page. If what you're saying is true, not if, I said. It's true. The question is, what do you plan to do about it? He stayed silent for a long time, reviewing each piece of evidence with the precision of a seasoned CEO. Finally, he looked up. What do you want, Mrs. Harlow? I want the firm to terminate Curtis's consulting contract immediately, I said. I want Esme Whitaker removed from her position. And if we agree? Then this ends here, I said. No press, no public humiliation. And if we don't? I stood, calmly gathering the documents back into my briefcase. Then tomorrow morning, Amanda Foster will publish a story about Hartley & Associates enabling an affair between a married consultant and a pregnant married employee, and I will sue both your firm and my husband for financial fraud and emotional distress. Jonathan Hartley was a smart man. He understood instantly which path I was offering, the only path that preserved his firm's reputation. I need time to investigate, he said. Of course, I replied, but I need an answer by tomorrow evening. My husband returns from his trip, and I want everything settled before he realizes his entire world is about to collapse. I left my business card on Hartley's desk and walked out, knowing the first shot of a war Curtis didn't even know had begun had just been fired. The next evening, I cooked Curtis's favorite meal with the same precision I'd had for 10 years. Butter lemon seared salmon, roasted asparagus, pineapple jasmine rice, and the bottle of French red wine we'd saved for a special occasion. The table was set with our wedding china. Candles flickered in crystal holders. Soft jazz drifted from the speakers he installed last year. To anyone looking in, this was a romantic dinner for a couple celebrating a reunion after a business trip. But I wasn't celebrating. I was holding a funeral for our marriage, and I wanted it to be perfect. When dinner ended, I made 2 cups of tea, waiting just as he finished unpacking. Maybe I should have told him not to unpack yet. Curtis, if you could choose any life, no consequences, no limits, what life would you choose? He froze with his cup midair. That's a strange question. Humor me. Would you still choose this house, this marriage, this life? Of course I would, he said, but his eyes refused to meet mine. Why are you asking this? Because I'm wondering if both of us have been settling for what we have instead of admitting what we truly want. Silence stretched out like a cliff edge. He set his cup down and reached for my hand. Natalie, you're scaring me a little. What's going on? There it was, the real moment. I could still pull back, pretend this conversation had never started. Instead, I pulled my hand away and picked up my phone. I had an interesting conversation with Jonathan Hartley yesterday, I said, scrolling to the photo I needed. He showed me some pictures I think you'd want to see. I placed the phone in the center of the table, the photo of Curtis and Esme walking out of a luxury hotel, his arm wrapped around her waist, both beaming. The color drained from his face instantly. Natalie, Don't. I raised a hand. Don't hurt me further by explaining. I know about Esme. I know about the baby. I know about the apartment you pay for, the prenatal appointments, the jewelry, all of it. He stared at the photo as if it might burst into flames, then slowly looked up. How long have you known? Does it matter? I asked. What matters is what happens next. The conversation that followed was the strangest moment of my life. Curtis, confronted with undeniable evidence, deflated like a punctured balloon. The confident, successful man I had married 20 years ago shrank into a lost, frightened old man. It wasn't supposed to happen, he murmured, staring at his hands. Esme was just a paralegal when I started consulting. We spent a lot of time working together, talking. She's smart, but... I'm sure she is. I cut him off, my voice steady, even though anger was boiling in my chest. Tell me about the baby. He flinched as if struck. She told me 2 months ago. It wasn't planned, but when I found out, I was happy. God help me, I was really happy. And then you started looking for a house. His head jerked up. You know about that too? I told you, I know everything. The question is, when were you planning to tell me, or were you planning to live 2 lives forever? He stayed silent for a long time. The tea on the table had gone cold. I was going to tell you, he finally whispered. I just didn't know how. We've been together our whole lives, Natalie. I kept thinking there had to be some way to keep both without destroying everything. So what? I asked. Split your time between 2 homes and convince yourself that was somehow fair? I don't know, his voice cracked. All I know is I love her, but I couldn't stand the thought of losing you and our daughter. Congratulations, you've already lost both. I stood in the kitchen, still holding our wedding porcelain plates in my hands, staring directly at his face, draining white with panic. What do you mean? He asked, following me into the kitchen, like a man searching for an exit. His voice now was pleading, not arrogant. I mean, you've been out of a job at Hartley and Associates since yesterday afternoon. Your consulting contract has been suspended. You've lost that stream of income, I said slowly, each word sealing off every path he thought he could run back to. His face went ghost pale. You can't do that, he stammered. That's my career, my reputation. Your reputation died the moment you started living two lives, I replied. All I'm doing is making it public. He choked out, Say something, Natalie. You can forgive me. I'll end it with her. I'll undo everything. Just tell me what you want. Please. That was the begging of a man who had believed he could manage consequences like variables in a spreadsheet. I set the cup down in the sink and turned toward him with a look cold enough to reach bone. I don't want money. I don't want comfort. I want consequences. I want you to understand that what you did to me, to my life, cannot be filed under some easy compensation category. He turned away, holding his head like someone about to collapse. I can fix it. I can explain. I'll talk to Jonathan, to everyone. Give me a chance. You had one, I said. I already met Jonathan. I already laid out all the evidence. A newspaper is waiting for my green light to publish. How many more chances do you think you deserve? A chilling silence filled the room. He couldn't answer because he knew I was telling the truth. I don't know what to do now, he whispered. His words tore out of him in desperation. He loved both women. He didn't want to lose either. He didn't see a way out. You can't have both, I said, and you chose to try anyway, in secret, stealing money, lying, putting other people exactly where you've put us. I walked slowly across the living room, stopping by the window, looking down at the wet street. You think money buys everything. It only buys convenience. The cost, the real cost, you make everyone else carry. He dropped to his knees in front of me, grabbing my hands, eyes glossy with tears. Natalie, please, don't do anything reckless. What will people think of me? My career, my colleagues, the kids' future. I pulled my hands out of his, as if pulling away from something burning. Don't bring up the kids when you're the one who shattered this family with your lack of control, I said. You're going to go public with all of this? He asked, his voice edged with fear. Maybe, I answered without a flicker. Or you can sign the divorce agreement I already drafted, admitting to the affair, relinquishing all custody rights, reimbursing every dollar you spend on her from our joint account, and handing over all financial records so I can protect what's left. Once you sign, I'll pull the article and pause the charges. Don't sign, and everything goes public. He let out a hollow, broken laugh, tears mixing with confusion. You've gone too far. You must have thought the same thing when you chose to behave like this, I said. You promised to fix it. But you lived with her while lying to me. You used our money to fund someone else's future. That doesn't get cleaned up with an apology. I had prepared for this moment meticulously. Every step, every phone call, every meeting wasn't emotional impulse. It was strategy. Amanda has already scheduled the release. She's just waiting for my go. He fell silent, his mouth moving like he wanted to speak, but couldn't form the words. And more than that, I continued, my voice calm like a verdict. I've opened my own account, established a trust, and have documentation proving you withdrew money from our joint account to fund her expenses. I'm preparing a civil suit for fraud, and you know exactly what that means for your career and your name. He nodded wordlessly, realizing his game had spun completely out of control. I want you to leave, I said, cutting cleanly. Today, pack what you need and go. Don't create a scene. Don't say anything to our daughter. I'm not throwing you out. I'm giving you a choice. Leave quietly or be dragged out in disgrace. Choose, Curtis. He stepped back, eyes wet. So, if I go, you'll wait for the signature? You can come to my lawyer's office tomorrow morning to sign. If you don't show up, I send everything to Amanda and my lawyer files the suit. That's all. He couldn't believe it, but in the end, he lowered his head, his voice hollow. I'll go now. I heard the suitcase wheels rolling across the hardwood floor as he packed in. A panic, felt the final crack of all the years behind us. The door closed behind him with a soft but decisive click. I stood in the kitchen, wiping down dishes that had already gone cold, and for the first time in a very long time, I felt something else. Not relief, not satisfaction, but a cold emptiness, as if the most brutal part of the process had only just begun, and I was ready for whatever came next. As the thin rain slid down the kitchen window like gray pencil strokes, I drove with Ginny to Liam Whitaker's house, a 2-story wood home, warm yellow porch light, and a front yard trimmed too perfectly, the kind of perfection kept by someone trying desperately to hold on to normalcy inside a marriage that had been rotting without them knowing. I parked, turned off the engine, and sat for a few seconds. My heartbeat was steady, neither fast nor slow, a calm I didn't expect to possess. Ginny stayed in the car as I walked across the yard and rang the doorbell. The door opened after exactly 3 seconds, fast enough to reveal the kind of sleeplessness people pretend they don't have. It was him, Liam Whitaker. He stared at me, searching his memory for who I might be. "And you are?" "I'm Natalie Harlow," I said. "Wife of Curtis, your wife's lover." That moment, I saw it clearly. He looked at me as if I were someone diseased, or perhaps as if his world had just cracked open. I said nothing more. I simply lifted the brown envelope. "Evidence." "We need to talk," I said. "Privately." He stepped aside, giving way. "Come in." The house was dead quiet, but when I saw the half-assembled baby crib and the baby items still wrapped on the floor, I wasn't sure if this visit was the right thing. This betrayed husband had been spending his evenings preparing for a child he believed was his, and I didn't know whether the baby belonged to my husband or to Liam. He led me to the dining table. A half-finished glass of whiskey sat there. The chair across from it was empty. I knew Esme hadn't come home tonight, and likely many nights before. I placed the envelope on the table. I didn't push it toward him. I left it in the center, like an explosive device waiting for someone to trigger. Liam swallowed hard. "How long?" "At least 14 months, I said. "Maybe more." His eyes narrowed. A heavy exhale. I slid the envelope toward him. "Everything is in there. Messages, call logs, hotel invoices, photos, and—" I paused. The voicemail recordings she sent Curtis. His hand froze before touching the envelope, like he knew that once he opened it, his current life would be over. "The baby?" he wanted to ask. "Whose baby?" "Don't know," I said. He picked up the envelope. Thud. The soft sound of the flap opening somehow echoed in the entire house like a gunshot. I didn't look at the papers. I looked at him, at the way his hands trembled as he held the printed messages. There was a moment where his eyes widened, as if someone had cut a straight line through the center of his trust. The whiskey glass was knocked to the ground, shattering. Like his heart. He braced himself on the table, head lowered, his whole body tightening just to stay upright. I waited. I didn't touch him, didn't console, didn't offer a single empty line. After a long time, he finally lifted his head. "Thank you," he said quietly. His voice was gravel, scraped raw. He let out a crooked, broken laugh. "You know," he poured himself more whiskey, "I always thought I was the bad husband, that she was distant because I wasn't enough." He took a sip. "But some people, it's not about lacking, it's about greed." "I know," I said. "I used to think the same thing about myself." He nodded slowly, as if recognizing a piece of himself in those words. "What's your plan now?" he asked. I looked straight at him. "I don't have a plan. I'm just preparing the future for me and my daughter." Liam leaned back, steadying his breath. "Thank you for telling me," he said. 6 weeks later, I stood in the lobby of the county courthouse, waiting for the divorce hearing to begin. Everything moved faster than I expected, mostly because Curtis's lawyer had advised him not to contest any of my demands. If he tried to fight me in court, he would lose even more. Esme Whitaker was there too. She sat on a bench by the window, one hand resting on her belly, now clearly visible beneath a simple black dress. Strangely enough, Liam was also present. Over the past 6 weeks, we, the two betrayed ones, had become accidental allies. "How are you holding up?" He sat beside me and asked quietly. "Tense," I admitted. Then added, "But I'm ready. I just want this to be over." "Has Curtis contacted you?" he asked. I shook my head. "No. After he signed the papers, he disappeared." "What about you?" "We're also coming to an end," he said. "Curtis arrived on time, but he didn't look like the man I once married. Pale, cheekbones hollow. His expensive suit sagged on him like it was hanging on a body drained of will. His lawyer, a woman with a blade-sharp face named Patterson, approached, trying one last time. "Mrs. Harlow," she said, polite but stretched thin like a violin string, "my client offers you 60% of the assets, plus monthly support for 10 years. In exchange, he requests that you withdraw your cooperation with the Bar Association." I didn't need to look at my lawyer. "No," I answered simply. "Mrs. Harlow," Patterson said, "please, be reasonable. You're asking for nearly everything." "I'm asking for what I deserve," I cut her off. Patterson fell silent, and I saw defeat settle in her eyes. In the courtroom, the hearing moved quickly. Curtis had chosen not to contest, so the court only needed to confirm the division of assets and support terms. But when the adultery evidence was submitted, the silence in the room grew thick, almost suffocating. "Mr. Smith," the judge asked, "do you dispute this evidence?" Curtis's lawyer whispered in his ear, and he only shook his head. "No, Your Honor." "Good," the judge said. Her voice rang out, each word stamping itself like steel onto an unavoidable judgment. Then she delivered the ruling. I was awarded 75% of the marital assets, $5,000 a month for 15 years for our daughter, and $100,000 in damages for emotional distress. I felt a wave of satisfaction wash through me, but not the gloating revenge I once imagined. It was quieter, deeper. The feeling of justice being restored, of the scales finally balanced. After the hearing, Curtis walked toward me. His face was gaunt, his voice hoarse and bitter like ash. "Natalie," he said, voice breaking, "I know I don't deserve your forgiveness, but is there any chance that someday we could be friends? That we could salvage something after all the years we had together?" I genuinely considered his question, looking at the man who had shared a bed with me, dreamed with me, grown into adulthood with me. The man who held me when my father died, who celebrated with me when we found out I was pregnant, who danced with me at friends' anniversary parties and talked with me about growing old. That man had been real, at least for a certain time, but he had completely changed when he chose to stand beside another woman. "I don't know," I said truthfully. "Maybe one day, when the pain isn't so fresh and the betrayal doesn't hurt so sharply, we could have a decent conversation." He nodded slowly as if he had expected that answer. As he turned to walk away, he looked back at me one last time. "I really did love you, Natalie. I know you don't believe that anymore, but it's the truth." "I know once," I said, "but love without loyalty isn't really love, and we're standing here today because it was missing." He turned away, said nothing more. And I knew that was likely the last conversation we would ever have. Two people who once promised to grow old together. Curtis lost his job. The firm he had been consulting for terminated his contract. From a man earning millions, he now works as a consultant for a small company, making not even a tenth of what he used to. I heard he takes the bus to work, and that he had to move into an apartment not even 40 square meters, a place where even sunlight seems hesitant to enter. Esme gave birth on a rainy afternoon, a beautiful baby girl. She sent a photo in an old mutual friends group chat, maybe to prove she was still okay. But everyone noticed her hollow cheeks, the dark circles under her eyes. Liam kept his word. He divorced her, offered no support, and now lives separately from her in the small apartment with Curtis. each person carrying their own consequence, not because I sought revenge, but because truth eventually claims its due. As for me, I walked slowly around the house that used to be ours, now entirely mine. I stood in the living room, where the gray sofa set had once been our mutual choice, and suddenly realized it wasn't mine anymore. No color in that room belonged to me. No trace of the new life I wanted to build. So I began. I took down the wedding photo frame first. I didn't cry. I simply wiped off the dust, placed it gently into a wooden box, the way people fold away an old chapter. No tearing, no resentment, just folding and putting it into the deepest drawer of memory. I repainted the bedroom, from cold gray to warm cream. I rehung the curtains. I cleared every cabinet, every drawer, found old receipts, notes he had left, then tossed them into the trash, without a moment of hesitation. In the afternoon, I went to the garden. My daughter ran around with her box of crayons, chirping, "What if we plant more lavender, Mom? So summer smells nicer." I laughed, a sound I hadn't heard from myself in a very long time. We knelt down, loosening the soil together, pressing small roots into the damp earth. Each handful of soft dirt, each small shovel stroke, each pot placed side by side. All of it felt like the way I was rebuilding my life, from empty patches of earth that needed healing. The evening wind drifted through, carrying the scent of fresh soil and the softest promises that I knew, this time, were meant for me.